evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to another edition of Scoreboard on ACTN. It's always a pleasure every Tuesday evening where we come into your homes, where we discuss something that's relevant in sports in Trinidad and Tobago, and also sometimes internationally. Joining me on set tonight is my co-host Maria Thomas. Maria, it's a pleasure. Welcome.
Great to be here as always, George. Thanks for these great masks.
Well, it's COVID time, and we have to follow all the restrictions and do everything that is in place, follow the protocols to remain safe. Tonight we're going to be talking archery on the program, but before we get into archery, as you all may know or may not know, the Trinidad and Tobago Rugby Football Union election is supposed to be coming up very shortly. And Maria will give you all a little insight as what is taking place so far, so you all can have an idea, especially the people who are involved in rugby, to know exactly what is happening. So, Maria?
Thanks, George. Well, yes, we do have an AGM coming up, and it's quite an important AGM because it's going to cover the annual reports for 2019 and 2020. So it's really a great opportunity to kind of rally back together and look at what is going to be happening in rugby moving forward. So one of the major issues that we definitely want to make sure is seen to is that all of the clubs, all of our members and affiliate members are in a position to engage with the content, engage with the process. And we are a management committee driven union, which means that each of our member clubs and affiliate bodies have the ability to shape the community in the way that they see fit. So this is an opportunity for people to have their voices heard, for them to look at what's been happening over the past year, which has been devastating for rugby in Trinidad and Tobago, and also to look at what we want to see in the future. So now is a great time to engage, to ask questions, to say, what is the executive looking to do going into the future? And what sort of advisement is necessary for the things that we want to see to be implemented? Clubs will need to make sure that they are financially up to date. Fortunately, the finance commitments is actually a little bit less. So clubs are only required to be up to date with the minimum payment for both 2020 and 2021 because we're not sure what the season looks like. Right. So registering multiple teams, registering players, all of those things will be revisited when we see how our rugby season and the fixtures are going to look. So that is one of the positive things, that for a lesser amount than probably clubs were expecting, they will be eligible to participate in the election and the voting process. Right.
And when is the election due?
The election is carded for the 19th of April.
Right.
So there's some time to ask questions, to talk to people that represent you, both within your club and on the executive, to really have your voice heard in what is going to be coming up in 2021, 2022, and moving into the future of rugby in Trinidad and Tobago. As you keep reminding me, yes, 2022 is the centennial year for rugby. So we definitely want to move to a high point when we reach to celebrate that.
Okay.
The election is actually a great segue into our guest, who is...
Well, I know we had said we would have taken a break, but we'll go straight into introducing our guest. And our guest for tonight is the newly elected president of the Trinidad and Tobago Archery Federation. Target Archery Federation, Mr. Hasmath Ali.
Hi.
It's a pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Right, and I've met you many times before. You were the president, at events. But for the viewers' sake, let's talk a bit about who is Hasmath Ali, how you got involved in the sport.
I started archery way back in 2000, and I started archery purely from a recreational standpoint. I work in Port of Spain, so there were some bows on sale at one of the sports stores, and they looked very nice. So I decided to purchase one and have some fun with it. At the time, I had a couple colleagues who were in the Trinidad and Tobago Target Archery Federation, so they persuaded me to come down and join the group at Chagramas at the time. And everything took off from there. We had fun training, and in 2002, I was selected to represent Trinidad and Tobago at the CAC Games in El Salvador. And after that, I just continued training, continued participating locally, started representing Trinidad and Tobago at the regional level, the South Caribbean Championships in Barbados and Martinique, and continued from there to continue at the CAC Games. And eventually in 2010, I was one of the first archers to represent Trinidad and Tobago at the Commonwealth Games in India.
Okay.
I've been to quite a few of the World Archery World Cups representing Trinidad and Tobago, shooting basically with the rest of the world in my category. And I'm still competing.
Okay.
I haven't given up the bow as yet, even though in management. I've been in management since, for more than, probably since about 2011. And I've always continued my training and shooting. I believe the value I could add to the sport comes from my participation in it as well as an archer. So the value that I take forward is from an archer standpoint, looking inwards to some of the shortcomings that may exist and some of the improvements that we could make at the executive level.
And you have your own club as well?
I also, during that period of my development in 2005, I actually started the Central Precision Archery Club. To date, it's one of the largest clubs in the country, and we've been doing quite well, producing quite a number of archers who've represented Trinidad and Tobago both locally, regionally, and internationally.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. It's such a great accomplishment. And I'm inspired that you said you're not giving up the bow. And can you give me a little bit more insight as to how you're able to contribute, because you are actively an archer right now, as well as taking on these management positions? Right.
So you really need team players. You really need persons who have the same drive and passion. The Trinidad and Tobago Target Archery Federation, over the years and even before my time, a lot of the executive members actually were archers. So for their passion for the sport, one is what drove me to continue shooting and helping with management. When we step away from archery and you look at our background in terms of, you know, our jobs and our educational background, it also helped the federation develop, you know, with that view, you know, moving it forward. Because it's all well and good to be a shooter, but if you have something that you could give back to the community, I think that's what all of us stand for. You know, we work together, we bring what we have, our values, into the sport, and with those contributions, we were able to move the sport forward and continue to move it forward in a positive way.
Now, is the COVID situation and the restrictions something that is negatively impacting your sport, or are you able to still carry on with many of your activities?
Well, fortunately for archery, archery is one of what we would like to call a low-risk sport. And we've been able to adapt. We keep hearing about the new normal, and archery has not been spared. What it has allowed us to do, not only locally but internationally, is plan events in such a way where archers are able to participate while observing the protocols. For example, currently we are participating in a World Archery online shoot. It's probably the largest shoot that you've seen in the history of archery internationally. The last leg of the World Archery online shoot that took place in January, there were close to 10,000 archers internationally shooting in this event. Trinidad and Tobago had a field of 90-something archers. So it was exciting for us. We were able to shoot the tournament at our various club locations in the country, still contributing scores towards the national event as well as the international event. And we were able to utilize our judges within the federation to ensure that the tournament did take place in accordance with the rules that govern the sport. We are having, this weekend, the last leg of the World Archery online shoot and our second stage of the Trinidad and Tobago Target Archery 18-meter tournament. Traditionally, over the years, February would have been our month for our national indoor championships. But again, because of the restrictions, we had to adapt. Some clubs can do it indoors, some clubs can't. So we've adapted the tournament to have it a straight 18-meter event. So clubs who can shoot outside could still continue to participate. And we've then split the categories to an indoor ranking round and an outdoor ranking round, which again created some history for the sport in Trinidad. Traditionally, we did not have an 18-meter outdoor tournament, but because of COVID, we were able to do that. So we would now have national records being set at the outdoor event as well.
Now, you have been newly elected as the president. What are your plans, your long-term goals set out there, and how long is your term?
The term is 4 years.
4 years.
So we have a strategic plan that the Federation has been working with from time to time. So one of our first goals would be to relook at that strategic plan and see how best we could tailor it for our 4-year term. One of my things is that we need to have achievables at the end of every year. And it may not be big ones, but at least we could say that we accomplished certain things to drive the sport forward, right? So that's one of the first things we want to do. We also realize that as a community, the Federation executive cannot manage the entire sport by itself, and we really need contributors to it. So leading into this election, what we've done is actually revamped our constitution. We are now a federation of clubs. Prior to that, we were individuals on the executive from within the fraternity. But now we have on the executive all the clubs represented. And we have now created a membership platform where all the persons within all the clubs are now members of the federation. So that has also enabled us to have a large base from which to pull management talent. And we are also looking at getting some subcommittees going that would also help the management team, the executive, in terms of managing the various aspects of the sport. So that's our goal right now, and we had our first executive meeting on Monday. So we've started establishing some of those subcommittees, and we are hoping that, you know, as we go along, we will continue to refine and improve, you know, what we are doing at those committee levels, and of course the recommendations coming out will again add value to the development of the sport.
How large is the pool of clubs affiliated to the
We have 9 active clubs currently, and with the, I don't want to use the word reorganization, but the reactivation of, we have 2 additional clubs that once we get them reactivated and going, that's going to take us to 11 clubs nationally.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so I noticed within the strategic plan that one of the objectives is to increase the participation.
Yes.
So for people who might be interested in joining archery, are there any specific recommendations you have regarding, say, age, abilities, all of these different things?
Well, what the Trinidad and Tobago Target Archery has done over the years is develop a national framework document. And within that framework document, there is a national grading system that we would like all the clubs to adopt. We have quite a number of the clubs who are following it, and we are working with those who are now developing and wanting to use the program. What that grading system actually does, it takes the average person off the street, and it takes you through a number of training modules. Of course, because our sport is score-oriented, we have grading platforms where the archers would then go through their training, attend their grading sessions, and then they would get promoted up. We've, within that system, created an area where we could then say archers at this level could participate at the national events. Archers from within that category could then be selected for regional and international competition. And that has also tied back into our selection policy for archers going to regional and international competition as well. The grading system actually could take an archer all the way up to the Olympics, because there are scores and requirements set within the grading system for archers who are also competing internationally to make those scores, who could then be eyeballed by the executive committee for selection to go to qualifiers to try and get into the Olympics and into some of the other international tournaments.
Is there a selection process for joining a club, or can anyone join a club?
Anybody could join a club. The format basically is that when you come into a club, you're going to be assessed. And of course, after that assessment is done, of your background checks to make sure that you're able-bodied to do the sport. One of the first things they would do is actually check your eye dominance to ensure that you're fitted with the correct equipment. And then they would take you through a beginner program. And usually that beginner program is to orient the individual with the rules and regulations with regards to the sport, get you into shooting and developing what we like to call your shot sequence. And eventually, at the end of that program, get you onto our national grading system via your first grading. And then it continues from there. Beyond that is when we start to focus more on biomechanics and really tailor the sport to the individual based on the individual body type, and of course the type of bow that person would like to shoot, right? So once you get past the beginner program, the doors are open, the sky is the limit, and you just continue training.
I also saw that one of the objectives is to look at the para sport. So as far as Paralympics and things like that, what sort of steps are you taking to encourage people with different levels of ability who would qualify for that category?
We've, a couple of years ago, started working with the Paralympic Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, and we did some initial work in terms of trying to set up a specific program for the Paralympic Committee. What we've learned over the years since then is the federation and the clubs are the ones who would eventually have to develop and run those programs. We did have a couple archers attend some international training as it relates to para-archers, but I still think more can be done to develop that module. We did have some archers locally who would have, or persons locally who would have tried the sport. One young man in particular did reach quite far in his development locally, but again, because of the, school and etc., he had to cut back, and so he's still in training, but not as regular as before. But there are opportunities there for persons, differently able persons to participate in the sport. But like everything else, the funding is required, particularly for the establishment of the facilities and the ranges, so that we have things in place when these individuals come to the fields that they're well accommodated.
Right. I know we have to take a break, but when we come back, I want to touch on archery is a sort of expensive sport. What do the clubs have in place that if an archer comes in and cannot afford? Because sometimes we lose athletes along the way because they don't have the financial backing to get equipment. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, you'll answer that question. Viewers, you are watching Scoreboard on ACTN. We're talking to Hasmath Ali, the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Target Archery Federation. We'll be right back after this short break.
We, from those encounters together, and this was a North-South game to open the season.
So the team might be playing well, as we always say with Trinidad and Tobago.
Futsal did that great for me.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name is Steve David, I'm your host.
Welcome back. You are watching Scoreboard. We are discussing archery, and we are here with our guest, the newly elected president of the Target Archery Federation of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Hasmath Ali. And we're exploring what archery can offer to people who are participating? And specifically, the next question up is, how do people fund their sport? How is that done on an individual level, and what kind of club support is available for athletes?
Okay, so if I start with the clubs, when somebody joins archery at the club level, the clubs are able to actually contribute the equipment as part of that developmental pathway that we spoke about previously. So the beginner program, persons are not required to acquire their own bow.
Okay.
And by right, the average person coming off the street is not fully developed for archery. So we tend to take them to a number of training tools, one being stretch bands and rubber bands, to get their alignment, to get what we like to call their draw length. And eventually we put them on very light club bows. One of the tools used by the Colombian Federation is the use of PVC bows, which are extremely light, 5 to 10 pounds in draw weight. And it allows the person to actually go through the motion and learn properly the techniques that they need to use when they're shooting, to help with their postural alignment, to help with their biomechanics, shoulder joint alignment, etc. And then we eventually take them onto heavier club bows, which would be between 10 to 15 pounds, 10 to 20 pounds. And those are still light enough for the individual to continue shooting, and shooting at a considerable distance, 15, 20 meters maximum, where you would want them to be exploring and developing, particularly, again, looking at form and technique. Once the person gets past that stage, some clubs are still able to have them use club bows to shoot and continue the development on the grading program, 30 meters, 50 meters. And we have the availability of some what we call compound bows. There are two types of bows we use, the recurve and the compound bow. And some clubs are able to get persons on club compound bows, again, to help with the development. And it's at that point when the archer is really serious about it, we start thinking about the purchasing of equipment for the archer, personalized equipment. What we've been doing over the years, some of the clubs is actually facilitating the archers by helping purchase equipment. But I would also like persons to know that buying archery equipment is like buying everything else. There are a number of pieces out there. And if you look at some of the catalogs, I guess some people would see very expensive prices. And archery equipment could actually take you into tens of thousands of dollars. You could spend $20,000 for a kit. But for developing archers, that might not necessarily be the kit for that person. A lot of the archers internationally who shoot these very expensive kits are they're either funded or they are sponsored. You know, and like everything else, if somebody is using a particular piece of equipment for show for advertisement purposes, everybody would gravitate to buy that brand or that piece of equipment. And archery is just like everything else. That's the tool, the marketing tools that are used. But there are pieces of equipment available that are mid-range, that intermediate archers could purchase, that can take them into the international competition. We've had archers from Trinidad and Tobago represent the country at international events using those intermediate kits, right? And they've done quite well, right? In fact, in one event, we've actually medaled with archers using those intermediate kits, right? World Archery and World Archery Americas, they've also recognized the fact that these pieces of equipment are so expensive. They've actually contributed over the years to national federations by supplying some pieces of these intermediate kits so that the clubs could then share that with developing archers or a developing archer in the club to move them forward. Of course, the selection criteria would also be looking at things like their economical background, etc., and then using that to guide us into moving those archers forward as well once they continue to train and develop. The international body and our regional body, World Archery Americas, they've also partnered with some of the manufacturers. So every year, federations are now afforded the opportunity to get equipment at a reduced price. So we buy directly now from the manufacturer and not through one of the agents. And of course, we are afforded a better price to the archers who would like to acquire equipment, and those serious ones who are in training. So it's another tool used by the international community to help developing countries. All right, so those are some of the things that we do, but a lot of it has to do with in the initial stages of the archer's development, and usually within the first year, the club is there to actually hold the person's hand and move them through the sport using equipment that that will be housed at the club. And of course, some of it would have been contributed to the club by the Trinidad and Tobago Target Archery Federation as starter kits. So that's the tools that we would use to guide these archers through their development.
So then finances wouldn't be a deterrent for someone beginning archery?
No, it's like everything else. Somebody gets into cricket, football, etc. There are tools that they would use to develop, and the clubs would normally provide it. It's similar for archery, and we are there to help the persons move into the sport. And once they get their footing in and they're serious about it, there are avenues to acquire equipment.
Now, you mentioned some things about the weights of the bows, which I'm already starting to feel in my shoulders a little bit. What kind of fitness and physical training is required for archery?
Archery is a holistic sport. It's mind, body, and spirit. From your physical conditioning, aerobic work is extremely important, particularly when you're going to be shooting at competitions that could actually last you 2 days, 2 full days of shooting. So we normally would emphasize aerobic training, persons to continue their cardiovascular work, etc. But we also require some strength training. Now, our strength training is a little specific. We really don't encourage archers to use a lot of weights in their development. We tend to gravitate more towards stretch bands and tension bands. The difference is, of course, with using a lot of weight to get a lot of bulky muscles, right? And that usually inhibits the type of rotational movement we require in persons shooting a bow. So what we do is use the tension bands and even their own bows to help them to develop nice elongated muscles and a flexible frame, so that they could then rotate and get their bodies into that biomechanical alignment that require them to get them into to keep making those straight shots to the target.
I know Sonan Botek with Selvin Jagosa, I know he do a lot of work in schools. What are the connection between the Federation and schools? Are there an active school program? How many schools, what sort of work you all do with schools?
Traditionally, we would have left a lot of these school programs to the clubs.
Okay.
So as part of their pool and their development intake, they would then go to the schools for the clubs who can do that to get archers in. But with the advent of that national grading system, we would like to get the schools a little more involved. One of the thoughts of the previous executive was to have a national intercall. And in order to get the schools involved, we were planning to have an initial tournament where we would have used the kids that are already in the sport to showcase to the ministry this is what the sport can offer the kids as to help with their developmental part. We are hoping within this executive to capitalize on that. COVID, of course, is there, and that's one of our limiting factors. But we would like to showcase to the Ministry of Education the positives behind a sport like archery and how it can contribute to the kids' holistic development, and of course provide an avenue for them to continue some sort of physical training, given the limitations that we are working with, not only with COVID, but given our rigorous education modules that we have that kids are now, I don't want to use the word forced, but they have to adhere to.
Yeah. You all affiliated to the Ministry of Sports?
Yes, we are.
So you all have received some sort of funding from them? Or?
Yes. From time to time, we would receive subvention from the Ministry of Sports.
Right.
I could wear my hat with the other sporting organizations and say, we would hope it'd be more.
Yeah.
But whatever contributions we get, we always try to use that to help. And that has been a great help to us in keeping the sport going over the years and continuing our development as we go along.
What are some of the highlights of achievement from the standpoint of archery in sports, because I recently saw where Hasmath Ali became the first local archer to really created history to be in an elite bunch where he took part in 3 different events. So I needed to explain to the public what this 3 different events entail, and and how he came about achieving this milestone.
So those 3 events were basically shooting in the compound bow category, the recurve or the Olympic bow category, and what we call now the bear bow category. Those are 3 standard disciplines that the World Archery Federation would have in any given tournament. Given the fact that this particular tournament was online and we could have shot it over a 3-day period, Mr. Omar Ali thought it quite ingenious of himself to participate in all 3. One of the nice things about the sport as well is if an archer trains well, and the form that he used could be transitioned into all 3 categories. So it's not a difference in form, it's the same form. And we've been able to tailor the equipment in such a way that Mr. Omar Ali would have been comfortable shooting all 3 bows and be able to perform as we would have seen remarkably in terms of shooting very good scores. So he actually participated in all 3 events given the 3 days of competition that we would have had. I know on him it was quite rigorous because coming out of competition in the club where he trained, they actually had competition the night before. He had to compete in the competition the night. He had to come out the next morning and shoot, and then the same day on the Saturday evening come out and shoot the next bow. And he would have shot 60 scoring arrows at each one of those events, right? So the concentration had to be there, the physical fitness as you asked had to be there, and of course the desire to compete also had to be there. So yes, it was remarkable, and I know he've actually set the stage for others to try, and that's great because we would like to see people get as competitive as possible in the sport, and of course contribute to the sport development in that way locally as well.
How long can an archer be on the course during a competition, like in hours?
All right, so if I step back a bit, some years ago we would have shot what we call a 1440 round. That's shooting 144 scoring arrows at 4 different distances. We've actually shot that in Trinidad at our nationals in 1 day. We would have started shooting in the morning at 8 o'clock, and we would have finished shooting in the evening at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening. We would have shot 36 scoring arrows at 90 meters, so that's the length of your football field, right? And then we would have shot the shortest distance being 30 meters. The 2 intermediate distances would have been 70 and 50 meters. So it was at 90 first, then at 70, then at 50, then at 30. For the cadets, they would have shot at 60 meters, 50 meters, 40 meters, and 30 meters, right? So you could have shoot from the morning, at 8 in the morning, all the way down to 6 o'clock in the evening, and come back the next day to shoot your elimination matches, which can take you again, if depending on the number of archers in your category, another day.
Wow.
So in terms of hydration and nutrition.
No, but as an athlete who was involved in that, and you come back next day, what keeps you mentally and physically intact to go through an entire day and come back next day?
Your physical condition is important. So physically, it's not too much. It's not demanding on you. Mentally, it is. To be able to stay in the environment, and if it's windy, to work with the wind. If you have rain, to work with the rain. At the end of that particular day, I've been in buses coming back from tournaments where everybody is sleeping. And you sleep for hours. You go to sleep while you're on the bus, and you get back up for breakfast the next morning, ready to go again. But it's something that we've been conditioned to do over the years. It takes a lot of development and training to be able to get to that level. There is a tournament in the United States in Arizona, the Arizona Cup, where they actually shoot this 1440 round back to back. So you shoot 1440 on the Saturday, you come and shoot 1440 on the Sunday, they accumulate the scores, and then they put you into eliminations, right? A tournament could last you 5 days.
That test match?
Yes, it's like a test match. It's like a test match. Some of the regional events, when they do 1440 rounds, you shoot the 2 longest distance on one day. You shoot the 2 shorter distances on the second day. You come on the third day and shoot your elimination matches. If you get up to the gold medal round, you are then put aside to shoot that on a separate day. And then you also shoot the team events on another day. So it takes you to about 5 days of competition.
That takes some tenacity to get through that.
It does. It does. It takes a lot of you out of you to get to that sort of competition. But like I said, if you're training for it, you know, like every other sport, you put your mind, your body, and your spirit into it. It's quite achievable. Over the years, we've had archers medal at these events. Whether in, I think we had an archer, Mr. George Vaya, in fact, it was at the Dominican Republic tournament. I think it's the Copa Merengue was the name of the event. He actually won gold at that event some years ago. And then we had the compound team who won the Costa Rican Cup outright. Again, shooting that 1440 round and the elimination matches. Okay, so it's demanding. Archery, it's not just about pulling the bow. It looks easy when we draw the bow and shoot, but there's a lot behind the sport that a lot of people don't see.
You used the term, I believe, scoring arrows.
Yeah.
That makes me feel like there were a lot more arrows that were fired or that were shot.
Yes, usually on a given competition day, there's about 3 rounds of 6 arrows each. It's 18 additional arrows that the archers are given to set their sights in and to warm up, if you want to use that term, before they get into the scoring rounds.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
I know we have to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a bit about some of the achievements that Trinidad and Tobago archers has achieved in the sport. And I also want you to compare to where our level is at present to the international standard. So we'll chat with about that when we get back. Viewers, we'll be right back after this short break.
We, from those encounters together, and this was a North-South game to open the season.
So the team might be playing well, as we always say with Trinidad and Tobago.
Futsal did that great for me.
Okay, hey everybody. Welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams and ACTN. My name is Steve David. I'm your host.
Welcome back. You're watching Scoreboard, and we are discussing archery with our guest, the newly elected president of the Target Archery Federation Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Hasmath Ali. So could you tell us a little bit about the standard of archery as far as it applies to locally in Trinidad and Tobago, regionally and internationally?
Okay. So Trinidad and Tobago is one of the, we would like to call the developing countries in the sport. The sport is still very young in Trinidad. Our federation was established in the early 90s, and competitive archery actually took off a couple of years after that, where we would have had archers go participate mainly at the CAC Games, the Central American and Caribbean Games, and then thereafter the World Archery ranking events in the region, and the World Cups as they came in, and of course the Commonwealth Games has been our highest achievement thus far. We've also had archers participate in the recent past in the Pan Am Games, right? So we've been doing quite well over the years in terms of development. More can be done. Of course, the developmental part that I spoke about in terms of that grading system, because it is score-oriented, it allows the archers now to continue and try to improve their scores. Coupled with that, again, is, of course, the whole training that's required. Dedication is one of the things that is really required with the sport. It's not an easy sport. If you forget to train, or if you don't train, if you don't do your homework, then it shows up on the field, right? So it's a sport that you have to be involved in every day, and continue development, and to continue your development. So we've had archers medaled at international events, world ranking events. Like I said previously, we've won the Costa Rican Cup in the past. We've brought home a number of bronze and silver and gold medals from various events. We've done fantastic at the regional events, particularly South Caribbean Championship. Trinidad and Tobago has been one of the leading countries in terms of the medal counts at these events. But there's always more that can be done. We've never had an archer at the Olympics, right? We've had one archer at the Pan Am Games. So we are hoping to improve on that, to get those archers who are starting to peak and develop, to get them international training programs and develop that as a tool to move these archers now into a different level of development, to have them participate and qualify to get to these larger tournaments. At the CAC Games in 2018, we had a pair who took part in the mixed team event, and they performed quite well. It was the first time that Trinidad and Tobago had archers get into the medal round of the CAC Games. So I think in terms of our improvement, when we come back from these games, one of the things that we do, we look at you know, what went well and what did not go well, and how we could improve on the ones that did not go well. And we've been doing, you know, successfully those plottings and knowing where we could improve on those archers who are starting to peak and show that sort of interest in wanting to participate in some of the high events.
Do you think that the adaptations, you spoke about some online tournaments and the fact that things are going virtual, partially because of COVID-19, but do you think that that continuing into the future will afford more opportunities for competition and participation?
I think it will. I think it will, and I think it would be a tool that the international body would be looking at developing, given all the travel restrictions and the pandemic as a whole. You know, in order to keep the sport alive, they've been developing the online events. And given the fact that they've done a lot of work around the world in terms of getting national judges, you know, that sort of training going and developing, as well as the whole management aspect of the sport, they are now in a position where they could run these online events and capture the scores. And use those scores now to rank archers. So we may see more of those online events coming on, and those may eventually lead to tools. We don't know what's going to happen in the Olympics. You know, when the Olympics start. We have Commonwealth Games. In fact, there's a motion by India to host the shooting sports in January 2022. And we really don't know what's going to happen in terms of persons getting to those countries to participate. So there will be continued developments as we go along with regards to the pandemic and some of the tournaments in terms of the challenges and what can be done to continue the events.
What about equipping the coaches? Are there courses that the coaches go through? How often do you have these?
We've been able to run some programs locally for coaches, and the Federation over the years has afforded the senior coaches opportunities to go abroad for their development. Okay. The TTOC has been quite instrumental, and I must say during the COVID period, they've run a number of programs for holistic coach development, and that's very important, apart from just being sport specific. So we have opportunities available for our coach development. Within the Federation, we've actually created a tier where we have the coaches based on their knowledge, experience, and performance ranked at different levels. And the aim is really to get those at the lower levels to move up and continue to work with the senior coaches to help their development and to help the club and archer development within the clubs.
So we have touched on players, we've touched on management, we've touched on coaches.
Right.
The adjudication, we talked a lot about how we can get online scores and the scoring, but what goes into those scores, what comprises a good score, and who's responsible for that judging?
Right, so we have a national judge coordinator who works with the group of local judges. That's another area that we continue to develop. So the more judges we have is the more events we could run. So basically they're responsible to ensure that the scoring is fair, that the archers are the ones responsible for taking their scores, and that is done in the most fairest possible manner. And then those scores are forwarded to the, if it's the World Archery event or even a national event, it goes for someone to collate those scores and then put them up, right? Important in archery is when archers are compiling those scores, they write very legible and they must sign their score sheets. We've seen international archers disqualified, and I'm speaking about guys who would have been at the top of the game, you know, guys who were supposed to finish in first place, forgetting to sign their score sheets or complete their score sheets, you know, get 0 because they've not done, you know, justice in terms of what the rules require. So it's that's the way we do the scoring. Some international events, there are both PDF scoring as well as, you know, the official score sheet. And that's just to allow for the running score so that person doesn't know what the running scores are like. But there's the official score sheets that must be signed by the archer and countersigned by either another archer or representative to ensure that the scores are fair, right? We've also used that as a tool for our archers to be trained so that when they go to international competition, you know, they know what they are supposed to do, right? Because you really don't want archers going and not knowing how to score, and then that's the end of it all after you do all this hard work, and then your scores are not valid. Of course, that'll be really devastating to any archer. Yeah.
Now, in some sports, we have what we talk about cross-training or, you know, going from one sport to another. As you said, you were professional in karate before.
Yes, yes.
What would you recommend for people? Are there specific sports that you think are good crossover sports with archery and training?
With youth development in particular, we allow them to participate in any sport. It's holistic development, and it's in keeping with that sort of developmental platform. You want kids in particular to experience everything. As they develop and they get more, if you want to use the word professional in archery, sports that would help with their cardiovascular development. Things like swimming, running, cycling, things like yoga, karate that would help with their focus, or I shouldn't say karate, but martial arts, you know. So those are some of the sports that we would normally recommend persons to participate in. In terms of strength training, like I said, we do a lot of work with tension bands, sports that would allow them to use their natural body weight. Are also sports that are very valuable to archers in terms of their development.
Over the next 4 years of your term, what is your main objective? What is something that you want to make sure that when your term ends, you implement into the sport?
I would like to see the national framework that we've developed fully implemented in all the clubs. That's one of my key goals. I think it's a tool that would really transcend the sport into a higher level. I would also like to see a well-developed national program for the schools. We see that archery have a lot to offer to the school kids, and it is hoped that if we could launch this well to the Ministry of Education, it can be accepted, maybe through the physical education program, as a tool for both the teacher development and the kids in the school to continue the sport. So those would be my two main goals right now. That framework is at the top of my list in terms of getting the clubs to fully implement and use that framework document to help their full development at the club level.
Is there a retirement age for the sport of archery?
Not really. I've shot against archers from Chile, 80 years old.
Okay.
There was a guy from Canada. I think he was over 80 years old. He was quite old. Once you could pull the bow, you could shoot it. You're welcome to shoot the sport. Archery has of course, categorized the sport for different age groups. Okay. So our first competitive group is usually our cadets, our youngest group, which usually ends at about 18 years. And then we go into a junior category that ends at 21. And then 21 to 50 is your senior category. 50 and above would be your master's category, right? And I say 50 and above to leave it open-ended.
So do you advise or recommend, I'm sure you do, but for people who maybe are not playing the sport that they started out in, is archery a good pastime for them to pick up then?
Archery it's a very nice pastime for persons who want to experience something different. Not everybody is cut out for what we like to call the traditional sports. Archery offers an opportunity for persons as well who may be injured in a particular sport but want to continue doing some sort of sport training. Archery offers that avenue as well. Like I said, it's one of those unique sports where it's individual, so it's really about you and your target, and your performance is dependent on how well you train. It's not always about competition, so we also offer a module for the recreational archer. Somebody wants to come in and just enjoy shooting arrows. And then the format of the tournaments available there, we've not explored all of them locally. There are a number of formats that are still available: field archery, 3D archery, which could also be developed that would also cater for another group. So it's quite wide and broad based. And I would open it up to anybody in Trinidad. I could speak on behalf of the clubs. They're always willing to accept persons who want to come in and try it. You don't have to get into a program. Just go out and try it, and who knows, you might just like the feeling and the sport and might gravitate towards it.
Who are some of our top archers in the country?
Currently, we have in the recurve male category, we have Mr. Danny Cateres. He's been doing quite well, and he's been he's our Pan Am athlete. We are hoping if he could get to the Olympic qualifier to try and qualify that he could do justice to the qualification. We have Ms. Hasmath Ali, who's been doing quite well at the female junior category, recurve category. We have Ms. Brianna Ali. We have Mr. Jonathan Thomas in the compound male category. And the list goes on. We have quite a few archers, up and coming ones, who've been doing quite well from the various clubs. And we still have some of the older guys here who've been shooting quite well: Mr. Peter Kong, Ms. Joanne Yates Buxing, and we've all been seeing, that great support and development from all of them, not only in their training, but also in contributing towards the development of the sport locally.
Archery in Tobago, Tobago seems in sports
and
always
I can't leave them out.
Yeah.
We have our Tobago club who's been doing quite well. It's led by Mr. Patrick Welch, and they've been growing. We've been working with them, providing, some management help and some coaching in particular to get the body up. They're quite a young bunch. They have a lot of young people involved. My last visit to Tobago, which was just before COVID, they did have some, more mature persons getting involved in the sport. And I did express to Mr.
There's only one club in Tobago.
Excuse?
There's only one club in Tobago.
Only one club in Tobago, but they've been doing a lot of work with the scout groups and some of the schools. So while he might be one, he's been growing it across Tobago, and he's doing fantastic. He's been seeing pictures, and the club is growing.
That's excellent to know. I would like to congratulate you.
Thank you.
I'm really inspired with what you've told us about the sport. I saw that the Constitution was revised this January,
Yes, it was.
which made me read it. And I think that it's really important. I'm not sure that everyone understands how important and how much of an impact a comprehensive and appropriate Constitution has in delivering a sport throughout the community. And so I wish you all the best as you are going to do this for Target Archery in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you. And our constitution is dynamic. Like every other constitution, it continues to grow and develop. We may not, see everything at the onset, but as we continue to either meet challenges or see new developments, the constitution, of course, would be revised.
Right. I just want to give you about 30 seconds because I know that you will have the opportunity to talk to the supporters and all the people involved in archery. Is there a message you would like to send to them?
Yes, for sure. I firstly would like to encourage everybody to take the opportunity to go out and try the sport of archery. It's very encouraging. It's a nice sport. I would also like to, appeal to our community in terms of the business community to support the sport. Archery has a lot to offer in terms of youth development, personal development as well. And continue to support the clubs in the community and continue to support the archers as they come by and, ask for your contributions to help them develop either locally or participate in international competition.
Well, viewers, we have come to the end of another edition of Scoreboard on ACTN. And first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Hasmath Ali for coming onto the program and spending this time with us and enlightening us on the sport of archery. I want to also thank Maria. It's a pleasure and always. And if you miss any part of the program, there's a repeat tomorrow at 1 p.m. and also or 2 p.m. on Saturday, we have another repeat. So you can't miss any Scoreboard. There's enough area and time and days for you to at least catch up on the show. So again, thank you very much. We look forward to having you next week with us. Remember, COVID is still with us. Please sanitize, do all that is required to stay safe because we want to have you with us next week as we continue our journey here on Scoreboard. So again, have a blessed week ahead.